I never thought I would end up testifying in court about garden tools, but here I was, sitting in the witness stand of the Montgomery County Courthouse in Conroe, Texas, explaining to a judge how I caught someone breaking into my shed at 3 in the morning. My name is Marcus Edwards, and I have lived in the Pinewood Estates subdivision for exactly 4 years. When my wife Sarah and I first moved into our house on Maple Grove Drive, we thought we had found the perfect neighborhood. The streets were clean, the lawns were manicured, and everything seemed peaceful. What we did not know was that our homeowners association was run by a woman named Patricia Henderson, who took her volunteer position more seriously than most people take their actual careers. Patricia was 52 years old with that distinctive haircut where the back is shorter than the front, always dyed an unnatural shade of blonde. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and carried a clipboard everywhere she went. Every single day, she would patrol the neighborhood in her white Lexus SUV, looking for violations of the HOA rules. And trust me, there were a lot of rules. The trouble started in November when the first snow of the season hit our part of Texas. Now, snow in Conroe is not exactly common, but when it does happen, it tends to cause chaos. Most people around here do not own proper snow removal equipment because we might see snow once every few years if we are lucky. This particular storm dumped about 6 inches on us overnight, which might not sound like much to someone from Minnesota, but for us, it was practically a blizzard. I woke up that Thursday morning to find my driveway completely covered. I had to get to work at the engineering firm where I had recently been promoted to senior project manager, and Sarah needed to drive to her job at the hospital. We only owned one snow shovel, which I had purchased 3 years ago and used exactly twice. I grabbed it from my tool shed in the backyard and spent about 45 minutes clearing a path from our garage to the street. Our next-door neighbors, the Johnsons, were an elderly couple in their 70s. I noticed they were struggling with the snow, so after I finished my own driveway, I went over and helped them clear theirs too. It took another hour, but it felt like the neighborly thing to do. Sarah made us all hot coffee, and we stood in their driveway chatting about how unusual the weather had been. That is when Patricia drove up in her Lexus, rolling down her window with that pinched expression she always wore when she was about to complain about something. "Marcus," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "I need to speak with you about a violation." I walked over to her car, confused. "A violation? What are you talking about?" She pointed at the Johnsons' driveway. "You cleared their snow but left piles on the curb." According to Section 14, Paragraph 8 of our HOA guidelines, all snow and ice must be cleared completely from the property, including the curb area, within 24 hours of the storm ending. I stared at her in disbelief. "Patricia, the snow stopped falling 3 hours ago. I have been out here working since 6 in the morning." "That is irrelevant," she said, consulting her clipboard. "The rule states 24 hours, but as board president, I expect residents to show initiative and clear snow promptly to maintain our neighborhood's appearance." "I just helped my neighbors," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "They are in their 70s. Did you expect them to do it themselves?" "I expect everyone to follow the rules," Patricia replied. "I am issuing you a warning. If the curb is not completely clear by this evening, you will receive a fine of $200. She drove off before I could respond, leaving me standing there with my mouth open. Mr. Johnson came up beside me and put a hand on my shoulder. "Don't let her get to you," he said. "She has been like this for years. Last summer, she fined the Petersons $300 because their mailbox was the wrong shade of black." "How is that even possible?" I asked. "According to her, It was midnight black instead of coal black, Mrs. Johnson added. They had to repaint the entire thing. I spent another 30 minutes clearing every last bit of snow from the curb, even though cars were already driving through and turning it into slush. When I finally got to work, I was 2 hours late and exhausted. My boss was understanding, but I was frustrated that I had wasted so much time and energy over something so petty. Over the next few weeks, Patricia seemed to target me specifically. She sent me a letter because my grass was half an inch taller than the allowed maximum height. Never mind that it was December and the grass was barely growing. She complained that I had left my garbage cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup. She even tried to fine me because Sarah had parked her car on the street overnight when our garage door opener broke, and we were waiting for the repair company to come fix it. Each time, I followed up, fixed whatever minor issue she had identified, and tried to stay calm. Sarah kept telling me to just ignore Patricia, that she would eventually move on to harassing someone else. But I could tell the constant complaints were starting to wear on both of us. We had bought this house because we loved the neighborhood, and now every day felt like walking through a minefield, waiting to see what arbitrary rule we would violate next. The real problem started in January when another winter storm rolled through. This one was even worse than the first, dropping nearly 8 inches of snow and coating everything in a layer of ice underneath. The entire neighborhood was paralyzed. Schools closed, businesses shut down, and the roads became too dangerous to drive on. I went out to my tool shed the morning after the storm to grab my snow shovel, and it was gone. I searched the entire shed twice, moving boxes and tools around, but the shovel had vanished. It made no sense. The shed was locked and there was no sign of forced entry. I checked with Sarah, thinking maybe she had lent it to someone, but she had no idea where it could be. Then I noticed something odd. The lock on the shed door looked scratched, like someone had tried to pick it or force it open. I bent down to examine it more closely and saw fresh scrape marks on the metal. Someone had definitely been messing with my shed. I walked around the yard looking for any other signs of disturbance. That is when I spotted footprints in the snow leading from my back fence to the shed and then back out again. They were small prints, probably from a woman's boot, and they definitely were not mine or Sarah's. Someone broke into our shed, I told Sarah when I came back inside. She looked up from her coffee, concerned. Are you serious? Did they take anything else? Just the snow shovel as far as I can tell, I said. But that is such a weird thing to steal. Who breaks into a shed just to take a shovel? We filed a police report, though the officer who took down the information seemed skeptical that anyone would really break in just for a snow shovel. He suggested maybe a neighborhood kid had borrowed it and would return it. I did not mention the scratches on the lock or the footprints because at the time, I was not really thinking about evidence. I just wanted my shovel back. Without the shovel, I had to improvise. I used a regular garden spade to try clearing the driveway, which was back-breaking work and took 3 times as long. By the time I finished, my back was killing me and my hands were covered in blisters. 2 days later, I received a letter from the HOA. Patricia was fining me $500 for failing to clear my driveway and sidewalk within the required time frame. I called her immediately, angry and frustrated. Patricia, someone stole my snow shovel, I explained. I filed a police report and everything. I cleared the snow as fast as I could with the tools I had. That is not the HOA's problem, she replied coldly. The rules are very clear. All residents must maintain their properties regardless of personal circumstances. The fine stands. This is ridiculous, I said, my voice rising. I am doing my best here. Someone literally broke into my shed and stole my equipment. If you wish to dispute the fine, you can attend the next HOA board meeting and present your case," Patricia said. "The meeting is scheduled for February 3rd at 7 in the evening. Good day, Marcus." She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat there holding the phone, fuming. Sarah came into the room and saw the expression on my face. "What did she say?" she asked. "She does not care," I replied. "We have to pay the fine or dispute it at the board meeting." "Then let us dispute it," Sarah said firmly. "This has gone far enough. She cannot just fine people for things that are completely out of their control." I agreed, and we marked the date on our calendar. In the meantime, I went to the hardware store and bought a new snow shovel, plus a better lock for my shed. I also decided to do something I had been putting off for months. I was going to install security cameras. I had been thinking about getting cameras ever since we moved in, mainly for general security and peace of mind. Now, with someone breaking into my shed, it seemed like the right time. I went online and ordered a complete security system with 4 cameras. 2 would cover the front of the house. 1 would watch the driveway and side yard, and 1 would point directly at my tool shed in the backyard. The system arrived within a week, and I spent a Saturday afternoon installing everything. The cameras were high definition with night vision and motion detection. They connected to my phone through an app, so I could check the footage from anywhere. I set them to record continuously and save everything to a cloud storage service. Sarah thought I was going overboard, but she also admitted it made her feel safer, especially when I had to travel for work and she was home alone at night. I tested all the cameras multiple times to make sure they were working properly and had good angles on everything I wanted to monitor. The HOA board meeting came around on February 3rd. Sarah and I drove to the community center where the meeting was being held. About 20 other residents were there, most of them looking just as frustrated as we felt. Patricia sat at the front table with 2 other board members, a man named Doug who always seemed half asleep, and a woman named Linda who never spoke. The meeting started with Patricia reading through various neighborhood updates and reminding everyone about upcoming dues. Then she moved on to violations and fines. She went through a list of residents who had been cited for various infractions, most of them minor things like leaving holiday decorations up too long or having slightly overgrown bushes. When she got to my name, I stood up. "I would like to dispute the $500 fine for snow removal," I said clearly. As I explained on the phone, my snow shovel was stolen from my locked shed. I cleared the snow as quickly as I could with alternative tools. Patricia looked at me over her reading glasses. "Do you have proof that your shovel was stolen?" "I filed a police report," I said. "I can provide you with the report number." "A police report does not prove anything," Patricia replied. "It just proves that you claimed something was stolen. For all we know, you simply failed to maintain proper equipment and are using this as an excuse." I felt my face getting hot. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I am saying that the HOA cannot waive fines based on unverified claims," she said smoothly. "If you cannot provide concrete evidence of a break-in, the fine stands." Several other residents spoke up in my defense, saying that Patricia was being unreasonable. One woman pointed out that she had also lost a shovel during the same time period. Another man mentioned that his snow blower had disappeared from his garage, but Patricia refused to budge. She called for a board vote on whether to waive my fine, and predictably, both Doug and Linda voted to uphold it. Sarah and I left the meeting feeling defeated and angry. $500 was a lot of money, and it felt completely unjust, but there was nothing we could do about it. According to the HOA rules, The board's decision was final unless we wanted to hire a lawyer and take them to court, which would probably cost more than the fine itself. "I cannot believe this," Sarah said as we drove home. "She is absolutely drunk on power." "I know," I replied. "But what can we do? We signed the HOA agreement when we bought the house. We are stuck with their rules." "There has to be something," Sarah insisted. "Nobody should have this much control over other people's lives." When we got home, I checked the security camera footage just to make sure everything was working. The cameras had been recording perfectly, capturing everyone who walked by our house, every car that drove past, and every bird that landed in our yard. I scrolled through a few days of footage, watching time-lapse versions of our quiet street. Then February rolled into March, and we got hit with one more unexpected winter storm. This one was not as severe as the previous two, only dropping about 4 inches of snow, but it was still enough that driveways and sidewalks needed to be cleared. I went out early in the morning with my new shovel and got to work. I had just finished clearing the driveway and was starting on the sidewalk when I saw Patricia's Lexus driving slowly down the street. She was checking each house, probably looking for violations. When she got to my house, she stopped and rolled down her window. "Good morning, Marcus," she called out, and there was something smug in her voice. "I see you are finally taking your property maintenance seriously." "I have always taken it seriously," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Well, make sure you get the curb completely clear this time," she said. "I would hate to have to issue another fine." She drove away, and I stood there gripping the shovel, imagining all the things I wanted to say but could not. I finished clearing the snow, making absolutely certain that every inch of pavement was visible. Then I went inside, took a hot shower, and tried to put Patricia Henderson out of my mind. That night, Sarah and I were watching television in the living room when my phone buzzed with an alert from the security camera app. I glanced at the screen and saw that the backyard camera had detected motion. It was almost 11 at night, and we were not expecting anyone. I opened the app and pulled up the live feed from the backyard camera. At first, I did not see anything unusual. Then a figure moved into frame, approaching my tool shed. My heart started pounding. "Sarah, someone is in our backyard," I said, keeping my voice low even though there was no way the person outside could hear me. She sat up quickly. "What? Are you serious?" I held up my phone so she could see the screen. The figure was definitely a person, dressed in dark clothing with a hood pulled up. They were crouched by the shed door doing something with the lock. "Should we call the police?" Sarah whispered. "Yes," I said, already dialing. "But keep watching. I want to see what they are doing." While the phone rang, I watched the screen intently. The person was having trouble with the new lock I had installed. They pulled out what looked like a screwdriver or pry bar and started trying to force the lock open. The motion-activated floodlight I had installed near the shed suddenly clicked on, flooding the area with bright white light. The person froze, looking up directly at the camera. Even with the hood partially obscuring their face, I could see enough to recognize them. It was Patricia Henderson. I could not believe what I was seeing. The president of our HOA, the woman who was constantly lecturing everyone about rules and proper behavior, was breaking into my shed in the middle of the night. 911, what is your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice came through the phone. "Someone is breaking into my tool shed right now," I said, my eyes still glued to the screen. "I have security cameras and I am watching them do it." "What is your address?" the dispatcher asked. I gave her our address on Maple Grove Drive and described what was happening. On the screen, Patricia had apparently decided the floodlight was not enough to deter her. She went back to work on the lock, finally managing to break it open. She pulled the shed door wide and stepped inside. "The police are on their way," the dispatcher told me. "Please stay inside your home and do not confront the intruder." "I will," I said, though part of me wanted to run outside and demand to know what Patricia thought she was doing. Sarah grabbed my arm. "I cannot believe this. Why would she break into our shed?" "I have no idea," I replied, "but we are about to find out." On the camera, Patricia emerged from the shed carrying my new snow shovel. She also had a bag of ice melt that I kept stored in there and a couple of other small tools. She looked around nervously, clearly aware that she had been caught on camera by the floodlight, but apparently deciding to take the items anyway. We watched as she hurried across our backyard toward the fence. She had apparently climbed over from the alley behind our house, which backed up to a small public park. She struggled a bit getting back over the fence while carrying the stolen items, but eventually managed it and disappeared from view. "Did you see all that?" I asked the dispatcher. "The officers are almost at your location," she replied. "Can you provide a description of the suspect?" I described Patricia in detail, including her blonde hair, approximate age, and the dark blue jacket she had been wearing. I also mentioned that she drove a white Lexus SUV and gave the dispatcher her home address, which was 3 streets over from ours. "And you are certain of the identity?" the dispatcher asked, probably because it was unusual for someone to recognize their burglar so clearly. "Absolutely certain," I said. "She is the president of our homeowners association. We have had multiple interactions with her." Within minutes, I heard sirens approaching. 2 police cars pulled up in front of our house, their lights flashing. Sarah and I went outside to meet the officers. I explained the situation while showing them the security camera footage on my phone. They watched the video multiple times, clearly surprised by what they were seeing. "You are saying this woman is your HOA president?" one of the officers asked. His name tag read Officer Martinez. "Yes," I confirmed. "Her name is Patricia Henderson. She lives on Oak Street." The other officer, whose name was Officer Chen, shook her head. "This is definitely breaking and entering plus theft. We are going to head over to her house right now." "We will need you to send us a copy of this footage as evidence." "Absolutely," I said. "I can email it to you right now." They gave me an email address, and I sent over the relevant clips from the security footage. The video quality was excellent, showing Patricia's face clearly when the floodlight came on and capturing the entire break-in from start to finish. "We will be in touch," Officer Martinez said. "You did the right thing by not confronting her. We will handle it from here." The officers left, presumably heading to Patricia's house. Sarah and I went back inside, both of us buzzing with adrenaline and disbelief. "I wonder what she needed the shovel for so badly that she was willing to break into our shed," Sarah said. "Maybe she is the one who stole the first shovel too," I realized. "That would make sense. Same small footprints in the snow, same method of breaking the lock." "But why?" Sarah asked. "She lives in this neighborhood. She could just buy her own shovel at any hardware store." That was the question I could not answer. It made no sense for someone like Patricia to be stealing snow shovels. She had money, she had resources, and she definitely had enough free time to go shopping. Why would she risk everything by breaking into people's sheds? About an hour later, Officer Chen called me back. "Mr. Edwards, we just arrested Patricia Henderson at her residence. We found your shovel and ice melt in her garage, along with several other items that appear to have been stolen from other properties in your neighborhood. We are going to need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement." "Of course," I said. "Did she say why she did it?" "She refused to answer any questions and demanded her lawyer," Officer Chen replied. "But between your security footage and the stolen property we found at her house, We have more than enough evidence to charge her with burglary, breaking and entering, and theft." After I hung up, I told Sarah everything. We stayed up late into the night, talking about how bizarre the whole situation was. Eventually, we went to bed, though I barely slept, my mind racing with questions. The next morning, news of Patricia's arrest had already spread throughout the neighborhood. My phone started ringing at 7 in the morning with neighbors calling to ask if it was true that Patricia had been arrested for breaking into my shed. Apparently, several other residents had also reported missing tools and equipment over the past few months, and the police were now investigating whether Patricia had been responsible for those thefts as well. I drove to the police station after breakfast and spent 2 hours giving a detailed statement about everything that had happened, from the first missing shovel back in January to Patricia breaking into my shed the previous night. I provided them with copies of all my security footage and explained about the previous encounters I had with Patricia, including the HOA fines and her constant harassment. "This is actually more common than you might think," the detective who took my statement explained. His name was Detective Williams, and he had been working property crimes for 15 years. "We see cases where people in positions of authority in communities or organizations start to feel entitled to other people's property. They convince themselves that they are owed something or that the rules do not apply to them." "So you think she was just stealing things because she felt like she could?" I asked. "Possibly," Detective Williams said. "Or there might be some other explanation. We are still investigating." We found about a dozen items in her garage that appear to be stolen from various houses in your neighborhood. Snow shovels, garden tools, bags of fertilizer, even a couple of lawn ornaments. Some of it was still in people's original packaging or had names written on them. "That is crazy," I said, shaking my head. "What I find interesting," the detective continued, "is that she specifically targeted you twice. That suggests this might be personal, not just opportunistic theft." I thought about that as I drove home. Patricia had definitely seemed to have it out for me ever since that first snowstorm back in November. She had gone out of her way to find me, to find violations where none existed, and to make my life difficult. But I still could not understand why stealing my tools would accomplish anything. Over the next few days, more information came to light. The police contacted everyone in the neighborhood who had reported missing items and asked them to come identify property that had been found in Patricia's garage. It turned out she had been stealing from residents for at least 6 months, maybe longer. The total value of the stolen property was estimated to be over $5,000. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly reporters were calling me asking for interviews. HOA president arrested for burglary made for a compelling headline. I declined most of the interview requests, not wanting to turn this into a media circus. But one reporter from the Montgomery County News managed to catch me outside my house one afternoon. "Mr. Edwards, how does it feel knowing that the person who was supposed to be protecting your neighborhood's interests was actually stealing from residents?" she asked, shoving a microphone in my face. "It is disappointing and frustrating," I said carefully. "We trusted Patricia to lead our community, and she violated that trust in the worst way possible. Do you think there were warning signs that the HOA should have noticed?" "I think Patricia had too much power and not enough oversight," I replied. When one person can make unilateral decisions about fines and violations without any real accountability, it creates an environment where abuse can happen. The interview aired that evening on the local news, along with footage of Patricia being led out of her house in handcuffs. I watched it with Sarah, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication because Patricia had been caught and would face consequences for her actions, but sadness because our neighborhood had been torn apart by someone who was supposed to bring us together. The HOA held an emergency meeting a week after Patricia's arrest. Doug, the vice president who had always seemed half asleep, was now acting as temporary president. The meeting was packed with residents, everyone wanting to know what would happen next. Doug stood at the front of the room, looking uncomfortable. As you all know, Patricia Henderson has been arrested and charged with multiple counts of burglary and theft. She has resigned from her position as HOA president, effective immediately. The board will be holding elections for a new president within the next 30 days. What about all the fines she issued? Someone called out from the audience. Are those going to be refunded? Doug consulted with Linda, the other board member, then cleared his throat. The board will be reviewing all fines issued in the past year. Any fine that appears to have been unjust or issued improperly will be refunded in full. We are also going to be revising our HOA guidelines to ensure that this kind of abuse of power cannot happen again. That got a round of applause from the crowd. I raised my hand, and Doug called on me. I think we need to implement some serious changes to how the HOA operates, I said, standing up so everyone could hear me. One person should never have the kind of unchecked authority that Patricia had. We need multiple board members to approve fines. We need a clear appeals process for residents, and we need term limits so that no one person can control the HOA for years on end. More applause followed, and several other residents stood up to voice similar concerns. The meeting turned into a productive discussion about HOA reform, with people suggesting ideas for better governance and accountability. For the first time since moving to Pinewood Estates, I felt like we were actually coming together as a community. Patricia's criminal case moved forward quickly. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the district attorney was not interested in going easy on her. Breaking into multiple homes and stealing property was serious business, and the DA wanted to send a message that people in positions of trust who abused that trust would face real consequences. The case went to trial in May. I was called as the primary witness since my security footage was the smoking gun that had caught Patricia in the act. I arrived at the Montgomery County Courthouse early on the day I was scheduled to testify, wearing my best suit and feeling nervous despite knowing I was telling the truth. Sarah came with me for moral support. We sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, waiting for my name to be called. I could see Patricia sitting at the defense table through the small window in the courtroom door. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than she had when she was driving around the neighborhood in her Lexus with her clipboard. "Marcus Edwards," the bailiff called out. I stood up, gave Sarah's hand a squeeze, and walked into the courtroom. The judge, a stern-looking woman named Judge Morrison, instructed me to take the witness stand. I was sworn in and sat down, very aware of the dozen people in the gallery watching me. The prosecutor, a young woman named Amanda Torres, approached the witness stand with a friendly smile. "Mr. Edwards, can you tell the court what happened on the night of March 8th of this year?" I took a deep breath and began recounting the events of that night. I explained about the security camera alert, watching Patricia break into my shed on the live feed, calling the police, and what was found afterward. As I spoke, the prosecutor played the security footage on a large monitor where everyone could see it clearly. The footage was damning. You could see Patricia's face clearly when the floodlight came on, see her forcing open the lock, entering the shed, and emerging with my shovel and other items. There was no question about what had happened or who had done it. Patricia's defense attorney, A middle-aged man in an expensive suit tried to poke holes in my testimony during cross-examination. "Mr. Edwards, is it not true that you had multiple disputes with my client regarding HOA violations prior to this alleged incident?" he asked. "That is correct," I said. "Patricia had issued me several fines that I felt were unjust." "So you had a motive to frame her, did you not?" "No," I replied firmly. "The security footage speaks for itself. I did not frame anyone. Your client broke into my shed and the cameras caught her doing it." "How do we know the footage was not altered or staged?" "The footage was examined by a digital forensics expert," the prosecutor interjected. "Their report confirming its authenticity has already been entered into evidence." The defense attorney tried a few more angles, but nothing stuck. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. After I was dismissed from the stand, I returned to the gallery to watch the rest of the trial. Several other residents testified about their own experiences with Patricia and the items that had been stolen from them. The most damaging testimony came from a digital forensics expert who had examined Patricia's computer and phone records. Apparently, Patricia had been taking photos of the items she stole and storing them on her phone, almost like trophies. She had also been keeping meticulous notes about which houses she had targeted and when, including details about residents' daily schedules and when they were most likely to be away from home. "This shows a pattern of premeditated criminal behavior," the prosecutor argued in her closing statement. Mrs. Henderson did not steal these items out of necessity or desperation. She did it because she felt entitled to take whatever she wanted from the people she was supposed to be serving. She abused her position of trust in the most egregious way possible, and she did it systematically over a period of at least 8 months. The defense attorney argued that Patricia had been under tremendous stress and was not in her right mind, suggesting that she needed psychological help rather than imprisonment. But it rang hollow given the organized nature of her crimes and the photographic evidence showing she had been perfectly aware of what she was doing. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Patricia showed no emotion as the verdict was read, just stared straight ahead with a blank expression. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. When the sentencing hearing came around, I was back in the courtroom to give a victim impact statement. I stood before Judge Morrison and explained how Patricia's actions had affected me and my family. "We moved to Pinewood Estates because we wanted to be part of a safe, welcoming community," I said. "Instead, we found ourselves constantly harassed and eventually victimized by the very person who was supposed to protect that community. Patricia Henderson stole my property, violated my sense of security in my own home, and abused the trust that all of us placed in her. Her actions have had lasting impacts, not just on me, but on our entire neighborhood." Other victims gave similar statements, talking about how violated they felt knowing that Patricia had been targeting their homes, stealing from them, and then acting like a pillar of the community while doing it. Judge Morrison listened to everything carefully, then turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Henderson, do you have anything to say before I impose sentencing?" Patricia stood up slowly. For the first time, I saw something crack in her facade. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. "I know what I did was wrong," she said. "I do not have a good explanation for it. I think somewhere along the way, I started to believe that because I was working so hard for the HOA, I deserved something in return. When people would not follow the rules I tried to enforce, I felt disrespected. I wanted to feel powerful, to feel like I had some control. But I know that does not excuse what I did. I violated people's trust, and I am sorry for that." It was the first time I had heard Patricia acknowledge any wrongdoing, but it was too little, too late. Judge Morrison was not moved by the apology. "Mrs. Henderson, you were in a position of leadership and trust within your community," the judge said sternly. "You abused that position to commit crimes against the very people who elected you to serve them. This was not a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a sustained pattern of criminal behavior that lasted for months. You broke into people's homes, you stole their property, and you did it while simultaneously punishing them for minor violations of neighborhood rules. The hypocrisy and betrayal of trust here is staggering." Judge Morrison sentenced Patricia to 3 years in state prison, followed by 2 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution to all of her victims for the value of the stolen property, plus additional fines and court costs. Patricia was taken into custody immediately, and I watched as the bailiff led her out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Justice had been served, and Patricia would face real consequences for what she had done. But more importantly, our neighborhood could finally start healing and moving forward. The HOA held elections the following month. Several residents stepped forward to run for board positions, including a retired teacher named Helen Morrison and a young accountant named David Chen. Both of them ran on platforms of transparency, accountability, and reasonable enforcement of rules. I did not run myself because I was too busy with work, but I voted and encouraged all my neighbors to participate in the election. Helen won the presidency, and one of her first acts was to implement all the reforms we had discussed at the emergency meeting. The new rules required 3 board members to approve any fine over $100, created a formal appeals process for residents, established term limits of 2 years for all board positions, and required regular financial audits to prevent any misuse of HOA funds. Under Helen's leadership, the atmosphere in Pinewood Estates changed completely. The HOA went from being an oppressive force that everyone dreaded to an actual helpful organization that focused on genuinely improving the neighborhood. They organized community events like block parties and garage sales, negotiated better rates for neighborhood services, and only issued fines for serious violations that actually affected property values or safety. My relationship with Sarah also grew stronger through the whole ordeal. Going through something that stressful together had reinforced how much we relied on each other, and how important it was to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. She had supported me through every frustrating interaction with Patricia, every unjust fine, and every moment when I wanted to just give up and move to a different neighborhood. The security cameras I had installed ended up being one of the best investments I ever made. Not only had they caught Patricia in the act, but they continued to provide peace of mind. I knew that my property was protected, and if anything suspicious ever happened again, I would have evidence. Several neighbors asked me for recommendations on security systems after seeing how useful mine had been, and soon cameras started popping up on houses throughout the subdivision. The story made waves beyond just our neighborhood. Several news outlets picked up on it as an example of HOA abuse and the need for better oversight of these organizations. I gave a few interviews to local reporters, always emphasizing that the problem was not HOAs themselves, but rather the lack of checks and balances that allowed people like Patricia to abuse their power. One reporter asked me if I regretted moving to a neighborhood with an HOA. I thought about it for a moment before answering. "No," I said. "I think HOAs can serve an important purpose when they are run properly. They can help maintain property values, organize community activities, and resolve disputes between neighbors. The problem is when one person has too much power and not enough oversight. That is true for any organization, not just HOAs. What happened with Patricia was a failure of governance, not a failure of the HOA concept itself. About 6 months after Patricia was sentenced, I received a letter in the mail. It was from her, forwarded through her lawyer. In the letter, she wrote about her time in prison and how it had given her time to reflect on what she had done. She apologized again for stealing from me and explained that she had been dealing with a lot of personal issues that she had never addressed properly. "I know this does not excuse my behavior," she wrote, "but I want you to know that I am getting help now. I am seeing a therapist, and I am trying to understand why I did the things I did. I think I was deeply unhappy with my own life, and having control over the HOA gave me a sense of power that I was missing elsewhere. When people challenged that power, I lashed out in increasingly destructive ways. I am truly sorry for what I put you and the other residents through." I showed the letter to Sarah, and we discussed whether I should respond. Part of me was still angry about everything that had happened, but another part of me appreciated that Patricia was at least trying to take responsibility for her actions. "I think people deserve a chance at redemption," Sarah said. "That does not mean you have to forgive her or forget what she did. But if she is genuinely trying to change, maybe acknowledging that is the right thing to do." I ended up writing a brief response, wishing Patricia well in her rehabilitation and hoping she would find a better path forward. I did not offer forgiveness because I was not ready for that yet, but I tried to be respectful and honest. Whatever demons Patricia had been fighting, she was paying a heavy price for how she had dealt with them. Life in Pinewood Estates gradually returned to normal, though it was a new kind of normal. The neighborhood was friendlier now, with people actually talking to each other instead of just worrying about HOA violations. The Johnson family organized a summer barbecue where dozens of residents showed up to socialize and get to know each other better. Kids played in the streets while adults chatted on lawn chairs, and for the first time since moving in, I felt like we were really part of a community. Helen, the new HOA president, approached me at the barbecue with a smile. "Marcus, I wanted to thank you for everything you did. If you had not stood up to Patricia and if you had not had those security cameras, who knows how long she would have kept getting away with it." "I just did what anyone would do," I replied, though I knew that was not entirely true. A lot of people would have just paid the fines and kept their heads down, not wanting to rock the boat. "Well, the neighborhood is better because of you," Helen said. "We are all grateful." As the months passed, the incident with Patricia became less and less a topic of conversation. New families moved into the neighborhood, and eventually there were residents who did not even know about what had happened. Life moved on, as it always does. I occasionally thought about Patricia in prison, wondered if she was really changing or if she would come out in a few years just as bitter and entitled as before. But mostly, I focused on my own life. Sarah and I started planning to have children, talking about how we wanted to raise them and what kind of values we wanted to instill. We talked about the importance of integrity, of standing up for what is right even when it is difficult, and of using whatever power you have responsibly. The security footage that had caught Patricia was sometimes requested by lawyers and journalists writing about HOA abuse. Each time, I made sure to emphasize the same points. That HOAs need proper oversight, that no one person should have unchecked authority, and that communities work best when everyone has a voice. The trial and its aftermath also taught me something important about courage. Before all of this happened, I would have said I was not a particularly brave person. I went to work, paid my bills, tried to stay out of trouble. but standing up to Patricia, refusing to back down even when she kept issuing fines and making my life difficult, that had required a different kind of courage. Not the dramatic, heroic kind you see in movies, but the quiet, persistent courage of refusing to accept injustice. 2 years after Patricia was sentenced, I ran into her lawyer at a coffee shop in downtown Conroe. We recognized each other and ended up chatting for a few minutes. He told me that Patricia was doing well in prison, had become a model inmate, and was scheduled for early release due to good behavior. "She asks about the neighborhood sometimes," he said. "I think she genuinely regrets what she did. Whether that matters or not, I cannot say." "I hope she finds peace," I said, and I meant it. Holding on to anger and resentment would not change what had happened. Patricia had been caught, had faced justice, and was serving her time. That was all I could reasonably ask for. The lawyer nodded. "For what it is worth, your case had an impact beyond just your neighborhood. Several HOAs in the county have reformed their rules because of what happened. You shone a light on a real problem." That made me feel good. If something positive could come out of such a negative experience, then maybe it was all worth it. Sarah got pregnant in the spring of our 5th year in Pinewood Estates. As we prepared the nursery and talked about names and schools, I thought about the kind of neighborhood I wanted our child to grow up in. I wanted it to be safe and friendly, with neighbors who looked out for each other. I wanted there to be rules that made sense, enforced fairly by people who genuinely cared about the community. And thanks to Helen and the new HOA board, that was exactly what we had. The night before Sarah went into labor, I was checking the security cameras out of habit. I saw the Johnsons taking an evening walk, saw a teenager from down the street skateboarding past our house, saw a cat prowling through our yard hunting for mice. All of it normal, peaceful, safe. The cameras that had once caught a criminal in the act were now just recording the quiet rhythm of everyday life. Our son was born on a sunny Tuesday morning in June. We named him Matthew, and he had Sarah's eyes and my stubborn chin. When we brought him home from the hospital, several neighbors came by with gifts and casseroles, welcoming him to the neighborhood. Helen brought a beautiful handmade quilt, and the Johnsons gave us a silver picture frame engraved with Matthew's name and birth date. As I stood in our nursery that first night, holding my sleeping son and looking out the window at our quiet street, I thought about everything that had happened over the past few years. The harassment, the theft, the trial, the reforms. All of it had been difficult and stressful, but it had also brought out the best in our community. People had come together, demanded change, and created something better. Matthew would grow up in a neighborhood where the HOA actually served the residents instead of terrorizing them. He would play in a community where people knew each other's names and looked out for each other. And if he ever faced injustice, I hoped he would have the courage to stand up against it, just like I had learned to do. The security cameras were still there, still recording everything that happened around our house. But they felt different now. They were not a defense against a threat from within our own community. They were just a reasonable precaution, a tool that provided information and peace of mind. The footage they recorded was boring and mundane, which was exactly how I wanted it to be. Years later, when Matthew was old enough to understand, I would tell him the story of what happened with Patricia Henderson. I would explain how important it is to question authority when it is being abused, to stand up for yourself and others, and to always do the right thing even when it is hard. I would show him the security footage that had changed everything and explain how sometimes justice requires evidence, patience, and the willingness to see things through to the end. But for now, I just held my son and looked out at the peaceful neighborhood where we had built our life. Patricia was serving the remainder of her sentence in a facility 3 hours away. The HOA was running smoothly under Helen's leadership. Our neighbors were happy and felt heard. And somewhere in a digital cloud, the security footage that had started everything was stored safely. A reminder that truth and justice could prevail when good people refused to back down. The shed in our backyard had a new, stronger lock on it now. The snow shovels and garden tools inside were right where they belonged. And if another winter storm rolled through, I knew I would have everything I needed to clear the snow, help my neighbors, and keep our little corner of Texas safe and sound. Justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and life went on. That was really all any of us could ask for.